Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today I want to talk about skills. More specifically, the top 5 worst skills in the game across all characters. But first, have you ever asked yourself questions like, why do people say, or why is everyone saying that this specific character is bad? Or why is this particular uniform good? Or even something like, how can I figure out whether a hero is good or trash? Well, this is going to help you in a big way to answer all of those questions and more. We're going to be doing this in a two-part segment, but this is a really interesting kind of meta look at the micro of skills and why skills are either really good or, in this case for this video, really bad. So I accumulated and I kind of collected the worst skills across skills 1 through 5, because believe it or not, skills aren't actually limited to a specific tier. In terms of what their skill effects do, it isn't limited, but in terms of their power level, there is some limitations. Majority of the characters 1, 2, and 3 will not do nearly as much damage as 4 and 5. And if you start to look at characters in those types of patterns, look at everybody's first skill, look at everybody's second skill across 157 characters, and it's actually even a lot more than that because of uniforms, you will start to see patterns emerge. So that's why we're taking it skill by skill. Now, of course, if I wanted to choose one character who had probably the worst skills combined, I could probably do that pretty easily, and a couple of names come to mind as like dubbing the worst character in the game. But rather than that, it's better to show you lots of different skills that all suffer from the same problems, so you can start to pick up on patterns and you can recognize these things for yourself and in future characters. Just so we're clear, this entire idea was spawned by this character right here, Hyperion, and it does tie in a little bit to the future buffs that he'll be getting. I still have no idea when Netmarble is going to rework this character, and I know a lot of you are still eagerly and patiently waiting, but it was during a random talk on my live stream months ago with my viewers. I was playing as Hyperion, I was playing Shadowland, and I remarked that his second skill, spoiler alert for a little bit later on, was one of the worst skills in the game, and I'll explain why a little bit later. But first, we're going to rewind a little bit and go to the first skill in the game, and the one that I've chosen in this case is actually an epidemic for all of the different Captain Marvel, so both Miss Marvel here and the original Miss Marvel, Captain Marvel. And it's the first skill. Just basically does absolutely nothing. It's one hit, it's a lousy animation, and there's no effect whatsoever. There's no stun, there's no guard break, there's no bleed, there's no buff, nothing. It's just a really lousy skill, one animation, very low synergy with other skills. The only time you can really work it in to do anything is to just spam all of your other skills and then just spam one in as well. And the problem is that it doesn't really matter what uniform you equip. Classic look, you go to Karachi, but if you also move over to Captain Marvel, it is the same for all 3 of her uniforms. So that's 5 different uniforms across 2 different characters, and I bet there are more if you guys look for them, with just completely lame duck first skills, with absolutely no use whatsoever. They don't even need to be in the rotation if you can manage to do 2, 3, 4, 5 and just stick to those skills. And that's kind of the framework for what we're looking for, is what does the skill actually bring, either in itself to the character or as a wider group, in terms of as a combination of multiple different skills, and these one skills do neither. Moving on to the second skill, and I've already told you it's Hyperion. Hyperion's second skill is kind of the epitome of a bad skill because it combines really poor damage and long animation time, which also hurts the DPS of the skill, with really garbage, poor targeting and character positioning. So it's difficult to show you guys with the skill preview, so I encourage you, if you have Hyperion, go play him in Shadowland or in a story mission, and you'll find out for yourself why Heat Blast is just so terrible. It doesn't position Hyperion properly because it drags him away from the enemy at first. So if you have an enemy that iframes or that runs away after that initial pullback, Hyperion will actually have 0 target and he'll stop his attack altogether. Additionally, when he moves forward, he doesn't keep track of where the enemy is. So for example, in a Shadowland stage, if you've got them pinned in a corner and you use the second skill, Hyperion actually runs past them into the wall and then lasers nothing. It's literally one of the most poorly designed skills in the game. It has almost no sense whatsoever for the position of your character, the position of the enemy, or anything else for that matter, and it doesn't even offer good damage, any kind of buffs, or even iframes. It's really one of the worst, and it inspired me for all of those reasons. For the third skill, I've selected 4 different characters who all exhibit the same struggles in terms of a really poor third skill. And we're going to start us off with Bullseye here. Bullseye's uniform does change him a little bit, but his third skill is the buff and nothing else skill. It gives him a buff, and that's it. With the uniform, there's a slight damage attack as well. There's 1 bullet being fired off, but otherwise the characters just stand there, buff, and then nothing else happens. And of course, you guys know that those skills are terrible for obvious reasons. You basically have a dead skill. You're working with a character that uses a skill that doesn't do anything. And in the case of Blade, it's the same thing. His default look is just a lame buff. Even at max potential, it's 8% crit rate, which is a joke. A 1-star obelisk has more crit rate than that. Yes, there's an attack with his new uniform if you have it and you equip it with the third skill, but it's still just an incredibly weak, feeble skill compared to some of the other very powerful 3rd-star skills or 3 skills that we have for certain characters and their buffs. And the same is true for both Mockingbird and Black Cat. Black Cat has the exact same effect on her 3rd skill. It's the dodge rate for 20 seconds with a 30-second cooldown. The only thing they managed to add over 2 uniforms of kind of reworks and enhancements is a slight iframe, but it's very low priority skill, and it's basically just for escaping and nothing else. I also left out Supergiant from this list because at least she buffs her elemental damage, but she was the other one I was going to tag along with Mockingbird, who also suffers from the same problem, having just a regular buff skill and nothing else. And that pales in comparison to the type of buff skills that we have now. Think of characters like Thor with his personal buffs. Ant-Man has tons of buffs on his skills, Jean Grey and others. They combine damage and buffs at the same time in an amazing way, and probably Winter Soldier is the best example of that. Moving on to the 4th skill, we have 3 different offenders, and they don't necessarily follow the same pattern, but they have some similarities in their difficulty. So we're going to start off with Nebula, and Nebula is kind of like Hyperion. You need to see the 4th skill in an actual match, especially in Shadowland. The targeting is just atrocious. Oftentimes you'll press the 4th skill and Nebula will begin the attack, but the enemy moves for some reason, or because they're attacking you, they move, and she just completely misses the target, and she extends, and she does her little spinny thing with those sticks or those swords, and nothing happens, no damage, completely whiffed, missed attack. And it's the exact same for her new uniform. Jessica Jones, on the other hand, doesn't suffer from that problem in terms of the attack missing, but her and the next person suffer from the fact that the 4th skill just does low damage and just has way too long of an animation. This is a 3-second animation on a single skill, and it just takes way too long, way too many drawn out hits to ever be something that you would want to use in anything but Shadowland, where you can kind of semi-stun lock opponents. So it's just a very poor skill, no effects, no iframes, no buffs, nothing. You can see that kind of vanilla really hurts characters that need buffs especially. The third one for the 4th skill is Ronin in this case, and whoa, is Law Enforcer a terrible skill. Whether you have his new uniform, whether you have his uniform or not, this skill takes 5 years to animate. The damage is atrocious. There are some characters that do more damage in 1 hit of a multi-hit skill than Ronin does in this entire skill, and they do that in 1 hit, which takes a fraction of a second. So you compare all of that damage condensed into a fraction of a second versus the same amount of damage stretched out over 3 or 4 seconds with no iframe and with the strong possibility that you will be interrupted by another character, which basically makes this skill unusable and complete garbage. Finally, we have the 5th skills, and believe it or not, before tier 3 and before kind of the ultimate 6th skills that we've seen now for Iron Man, Spider-Man, and Captain America, the 5th skill used to be kind of the ultimate skill, and that's why you have characters like Jean Grey and others where their 5th skill is this kind of monumental burst in damage. Doctor Strange has Sorcerer Supreme, Cable has the channeling skill, and other characters really shine in their 5th skill. Even new characters, you know, like I've said Cable, but also Wolverine, and others, Dormammu, really spike it up with their 5th skill. So finding characters with really lackluster 5th skills is really an indication of how terrible it can get at the very bottom. And we're going to start off with Drax, because while I wanted to put his 3rd skill on here, it pales in comparison to how garbage his 5th skill is. His 5th skill is basically Ronan plus Jessica Jones. He runs around, he attacks you, he jumps back and forth, there's no iframe, and it's basically only useful in very specific Shadowland stages. It's an atrocious skill. Comboing that, we have characters like Songbird. Songbird's a little bit different, but basically her 5th skill is really awful damage. On top of that, you can't cancel the skill. You have to stand there and absorb that entire animation just to get these pitiful little kind of zones, these little pink lasers that kind of flow out of the character 4 times. It's a really awful and really poorly designed skill, because it basically makes her a sitting duck for multiple seconds. She's basically asking to get guard broken, and the damage is just really awful. You're not going to hit someone with more than 2 of those at a time, which means, you know, it looks cool, I guess, when you're running around after you've cast it, but it lasts, you know, only 4 casts, and the damage is pitiful, and the setup for it is so tremendous that you're better off just auto-attacking at that point and not ever casting the 5th skill. Finally, we have Daredevil as the last 5th skill. Unfortunately, over 3 different looks with 2 iconic uniforms, Daredevil has been unable to change his 5th skill, Blindsided, and Daredevil might as well be blindsided by how horrible his 5th skill is. No iframe, no buffs, no stun, and super long animation, which is probably the worst offender for skills in this game, period. Honorable mention for all of these lists goes out to Destroyer with his 5th skill, because he doesn't have one, and in general his skills without his uniform are pretty poor, but I think the 5th skill, most of all, being an extra passive, is pretty entertaining, and basically just makes him a 1-note pony, but definitely not on this list, just there as a kind of more of a joke, more of a meme. So let me know what you guys think of the top 5 categories, kind of, or top 5 worst skills in Marvel Future Fight. I know that I named more than 5 characters, of course, but they all kind of follow a general theme or 2, and so I kind of wanted to categorize them that way and how it made most sense to me. Let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know who you would have included or changed up. If you have some more kind of worst ofs to nominate, subscribe if you enjoyed the content and you want to support me. Hit the bell if you don't want to miss any of my content, and of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.